This is the title I'm using, From Mass Spectrometry to National Strategy. Mass spectrometry, some of you already know what mass spectrometry is. It's a big piece of instrumentation, and I'm an instrument geek. I'm a research technical professional, like all of you. So this is really a story about a research technical professional through her career. And I'm also a mum of a grumpy 16-year-old, someone who likes drinking gin, someone who goes to yoga every now and again and tries to avoid the gym itself, someone who values my own time. And yesterday evening, for example, after a conference, I spent an hour lying in bed whilst my other half sorted out dinner. I'm just a normal person, but I'm also a professor of research infrastructure, and the first professor of research infrastructure in the UK. I'm an RTP who has actually become a professor through the academic route, because at Bath there isn't a professorship promotions route to professorship for RTPs. And I'm the Director of Research Infrastructure and Facilities at the University of Bath. I wanted to give you that context because that's important to my story as I go through. So I'm going to start with some origins and my early career. I've got more time than most, and I feel privileged to have that. I'm supposed to be your inspirational speaker, so I'll gauge afterwards whether I've actually inspired anyone by how many questions I get. So no pressure. Start writing down questions, please. I'm Dutch. Now, this is also important because it gives me a slightly different perspective to some people. And I was raised in multiple African countries. I had an experience quite early on where I was in a group of people, women leaders of colour, and they were looking at me saying, "Why are you here?" And I said, "I was the chair who chose you to be on this programme." And they said, "But why you?" Because when I grew up, I was one of 2 white kids in my school, so I do have a bit of a sense of what that feels like. So I was raised in multiple African countries, educated in the UK and France, and my education really started off from a dream of mine. I was brought up in landlocked African countries, and I decided I wanted to be the next Jacques Cousteau, the Dutch Jacques Cousteau. And on that basis, my dad found a Jacques Cousteau medal on, I don't know where he found it actually, and that has a picture of Jacques Cousteau on it, and, very importantly, a picture of his research vessel, the Calypso. My education was actually in marine science. I'm a marine scientist by training. And I have a link back to the CaSDaR team because that was at Southampton. So I was based at Southampton. I did my first degree there and my PhD there, and that was marine science and eventually also environmental engineering. France came in because that's where I did my master's. So you can see it's quite a varied mixture. And what this really meant is that I'm interested in languages, I'm interested in people, I'm interested in different perspectives. And that actually has been really important in how I've gone on to lead, manage people, interact with people, and so on. So, as I say, I started in marine science and environmental engineering, and in those I used mass spectrometry as my tool. And I realized I liked instrumentation. I liked making instrumentation do what I needed it to do. So this curiosity and the fact that my instrumentation during my PhD broke all the bloody time, that's being put out on internet, isn't it? Okay. Anyway, it broke all the time, meant that I'd worked a lot with instrument manufacturers and I felt I could take instruments apart. So when I finished my PhD, I applied for and got a job with Brooker, who's a mass spec manufacturer, and I worked for them for 6 years. And that involved a lot of travel. So it comes back to my traveling thing again and working with people. All of this was in a very sort of wanting to problem solve. And that's what RTPs do. We problem solve. We're using our technical skills to try and get to the root of a problem to really accelerate and enable progression. So this is all about collaboration and purpose-driven mindset. And so it kind of was an industry to start with. I'd left academia, by the way, because I hated the idea of writing grants. I hated the idea of having to do all the teaching. So that's why I left academia. However, 6 years after traveling from country to country for Brooker as part of the instrument specialist team there, application scientists, I thought, do you know what? I've had enough of this. And in 1 week, I was in 5 countries in a week. And it's like, no, come on, this is getting a bit silly. So I was doing a demo for the University of Bath on a mass spec, and they whispered in my ear, you know this instrument better than anybody else. Do you want a job? We're going to buy it. Do you want a job? And actually, that sounded good, because I'd still be working with people using my technical skills in mass spectrometry to help a whole range of different research projects. And actually, this time, I wouldn't just see them at the beginning of the journey when the instrument was first installed, but I would actually see those PhD students through their journey. So I said yes. So I'm kind of jumping ahead, look at that. Industry experience in Brooker, as I said, and then I transitioned to academia. And actually, sleeping in my own bed every night was rather appealing. Besides, by that point, I was 32. I want to start a family. And there's no nursery that will take a small child from Sunday evening to Friday evening. Besides, that's not really what I wanted to be doing. So I moved to the University of Bath for a job as a mass spectrometrist in the chemistry department. And there, I'm going to be honest, I could do the job itself with my eyes shut. But it meant that I had the headspace to actually start a family and to look after my small child. So for about 3 or 4 years, I wasn't focused on the career. I was focused on my son, Ewan, who's now 6'4", 16-year-old. So I joined the University of Bath, as I said, but one of the things that I definitely brought to the table there was, having worked in industry, one of the things that was obvious to me was there's a load of capabilities within universities that is underutilized, potentially, but even more importantly, industry are dying for access for it. So whether it's the skills of the people running the kit or the kit itself, or actually more likely the combination of the two, there's a real appetite and a real need from industry to access this capability. And so what I started doing in the Department of Chemistry at the University of Bath was starting to make this equipment more accessible to industry. And that was really with that knowledge of industrial need. So I move on there. There I am running chemistry samples in the chemistry department on a mass spectrometer. And one of the things that was also clear was that there was lots of us, individuals, instrument geeks, sat in different labs and actually not very well connected, understood by the academics to be part of their an extension to what their research team potentially, but also helping them to deliver, but actually not very well represented within the university. And there was no career progression pathways at all. We were invisible. The best way to make yourself not invisible, so make yourself visible, is to make sure there's a critical mass. And I think something like this grouping here shows there is a critical mass, and actually your voice is much louder if you collectively voice those thoughts. So I then started rising through the ranks, so to speak, and instead of being the mass spectrometrist in chemistry, we got all the chemical characterization facilities together, so that's mass spectrometry, X-ray, and NMR, and formed the chemical characterization facility. And I became the lead of that. This is really where my people skills majorly came in, because this was managing change, this was managing a team, this was managing finances and really starting to get into that facility management side of things, while still being the techie geek on mass spectrometry, right? So we started to build a facility, and that facility initially was within the Faculty of Science in Bath, and that then joined in with electron microscopy and bioimaging to become Material and Chemical Characterization Facility, MC². Took me a while to think that one up. And then that grew even further, and now at Bath, as of November 2023, we have centralized facilities, so everything sits at the university level rather than in departments or faculties, and that is part of my job now. So this is the core research facilities. We have 9 core research facilities at the university, everything spanning from the animal house through to motion capture studios and chemical characterization in the middle and so on. This is where I'm now linking with you, because as you can imagine, we generate a bucket load of data. And actually, the metadata that goes with that data is usually non-existent, and we've got a lot of sample 001, test 123 kind of things, John 001, whatever. So there is definitely some overlap and a lot of appreciation from my side on what data steward, the need for data stewards and what they do. What also started happening about this time, well, actually, in parallel with this, you'll notice, by the way, I kind of got here, right? My Jacques Cousteau, I studied marine science, but I'd left it well behind by this point, but I'll come back to it. At this time, too, about 10 years ago, I was tapped on the shoulder by someone who said, Anneke, UKRI, or EPSRC more specifically, are looking for advisors on their research, their capital infrastructure strategic advisory team. You should apply. You've got opinions. Didn't know how to take it initially, but but I do have opinions. So I applied, and I got on about 10 years ago onto the EPSRC Strategic Advisory Team for Capital Infrastructure. And I was the first RTP to be on an advisory team for UKRI, full stop. I had massive imposter syndrome. Everybody else was an academic. Everybody else was a professor, an academic professor in that room. And I was going to say, yeah, but you haven't thought about how much electricity that's going to use. Why have you not thought about the technical support that's needed? How are you going to deal with that data, et cetera, et cetera? And I was just going to be that pest in the corner saying all of those things when they're thinking about big strategic things, right? What turns out is that, have you thought about the data? Was actually a really valuable thing, and they started to listen a bit more and a bit more. So I started becoming, more and more involved in those conversations. And in parallel at the university, I was started to lead big capital projects, writing grant proposals to UKRI for capital equipment, now that I knew the inside track on how to do it. And all of this eventually has culminated in me being the first UK Professor of Research Infrastructure, which only happened in May or so, so I was thrilled. I was told I'd never get there, by the way. I was told by the Director of HR at the University of Bath, we don't need professors like you. Besides, you're in the wrong job family. You can never get there anyway. So me not being someone who takes no for an answer, I thought, I'm going to try. Besides, by this point, I was chairing several committees for UKRI where everybody in the room was a professor apart from me, and I was the chair. So I thought, let's give this a go. And at Bath, you can get promoted to professor level through the academic route for 3 different areas of expertise: leadership and management, research, and teaching. Teaching, I wasn't doing any of that, so that doesn't count. So I really focused in on the leadership and management, and then with a secondary in research, because I had co-supervised PhD students. I had published, I had done mass spectrometry stuff. It was starting to get a bit old, but I had done it, so now was the time to do that. What also really helped was a lot of grant funding, and that's where my pen comes in, and I'll talk some more about that in a minute. What challenges did I overcome during all of this? Well, as I mentioned earlier, massive imposter syndrome. Doing this, early days, 10 years ago, would have taken Valium for me, genuinely. Now I can stand up here and talk to you confidently with props and disclaimers and even raise a few smiles, which is amazing. But it was genuinely a lot of imposter syndrome. Why is my voice as an RTP important in this conversation? Balancing my career and motherhood. I was a single parent when Ewan was, or I became a single parent when Ewan was 6. He's now 16, so that's 10 years of being a single parent, and he's a stroppy teenager right now. It's not easy balancing that, especially when you're trying to also do some national stuff. Things like this. Up until recently, I could only do a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, because then he had long days at school, so I could get back in time to be there for when he came home. He's now old enough. I'll let him go. But what's really important in all of this is really strong and supportive networks. You're starting to build a network here. My networks were my mentors, the people who I could go to, the peers I could tap into and say, how do you do this? Or why do you do it? As well as just some advice of go and talk to that person or an introduction. Tap into those networks. They're really, really important. And really, this all started giving me a voice and a platform to start talking about RTPs and RTP progression, RTP development, career programs, frameworks and progression frameworks, and so on. So I've covered some of this already, because why not? The leadership and advisory roles, that's co-pilot writing your presentation, by the way. It doesn't necessarily flow like you want it to do yourself, but anyway, serves me right. Leadership and advisory roles. So I've been on the strategic advisory team in EPSRC for capital infrastructure, the equivalent in MRC. I've sat and chaired funding panels for DRI programs, such as this one, for UKRI. I have also been part, and this was a really important part, for the last 10 years or so, I've been part of the delivery team for something called Critical Mass UK. And I was talking to someone earlier who might actually benefit from that link. So Critical Mass UK is funded through the Infrastructure Advisory Committee at UKRI. It was announced about a year ago now, and it's £49 million for a distributed mass spectrometry network and infrastructure, with data being a massive part of it. So I'm going to be learning some more here. And what that meant is that was really working with funders, but to write a business case for government. So this is a different scale again from the kind of business cases for equipment or resource that you're writing within the institutions. This was writing those business cases with government. And the Infrastructure Advisory Committee I now sit on. So I'm going to be one of the deciding people who decides whether these kind of awards are made. This has all resulted in a lot of influence in policy, of course. Have I had a card flashed at me yet? No, okay, right, good. And very importantly, my narrative always is around sustainable research infrastructure. And I'm not necessarily talking about environmental sustainability here. I'm talking about making sure the people are there, making sure the finances are in place, making sure the technology remains up to date, and that you actually have a user base. There's no point having something where there's no need for it. So actually evolving that user base as well. So I don't know if any of you have written equipment or digital infrastructure grants, but you'll see a lot of those kind of requirements that you actually explain how you're going to maintain the equipment and so on within those grant proposals. And that is primarily, well, no, partially, as a result of me banging on about it. None of this can happen, of course, unless you're actually delivering. You can talk all you like, but you still need to deliver. So also at Bath, I've implemented some investment programs, both in terms of the internal funding that we have within Bath, but also supporting other researchers to help write aspects of their own grants for strategic infrastructure calls and stuff like that. Accessibility and sustainability, I now run, or part of my job is to run all the core research facilities at Bath, and accessibility is a really big part of that. So we're really looking at how we can make them more accessible to diverse audiences, both within Bath and beyond Bath. So remote access and stuff like that is also becoming more and more important. And we're growing our academic industrial collaborations. So we've made our facilities available to industry. And so there's more and more companies who are coming to use our expertise to actually accelerate their research and innovation directions. All of this is dependent on people. And people, where are we going here? Good, marvellous. The advocacy for RTPs. I told you, I did this yesterday, this presentation. So, here comes my pen. Excited is the RTP development programme that I lead. A bit like CaSDaR, this is for GW4, so that's the Southwest Regional Universities, and that is for digital RTPs, but also other RTPs. And we actually had our second meeting of that yesterday, so I was spouting lyrical about excited yesterday. And this is one of the initiatives that we have, a photo from one of the initiatives we have within that, which is called Industry Challenge Projects. And if anyone has any questions about them, then come ahead. But these are exactly the kind of things I'm really passionate about, excited, your networks, and actually being also part of those panels that help fund excellent networks for progression and development and visibility of RTPs. Quick overview of Excited, and then I'll stop, I promise. So Excited, it was funded £2 million. It started a year before CaSDaR, so you guys are doing incredibly well to already be at this stage with this number of people in the room. Hats off, genuinely, because it takes a while to build that up. Excited is £2 million, EPSRC funded, and we are aiming at around 200 RTPs across GW4. It has got communities of practice as part of it. There's a lot of overlaps here. These industry challenge projects where RTPs work with industry on a defined challenge in a sandpit and then follow-up project to really try and shift the dial on that industry challenge. And we have also brought in a talent bank in an attempt to create a talent pipeline. So we've recruited 4 junior RTPs into the programme who will be working within these communities of practice in different discipline areas to actually become RTPs, one of them in the digital RTP space. They're to bridge the gap. The idea is to bridge the gap between academia and industry and really also demonstrate the impact that RTPs can have within our universities. So, a couple of take-homes, a couple of lessons I've learned through my bit anyway. Progression's much better than perfection. I'm a perfectionist. I'm an analytical chemist by training. I want error bars on everything, right? Actually, that doesn't work when you're trying to change organizations or you're trying to change people's minds or get people on board. So progression, one step at a time, really over perfection is the way to go. And be authentic. People aren't going to buy into any vision that you have or any thing you want to change unless you're actually authentic and can show that this means something to you. Otherwise, it's just a load of words. Prioritize meaningful and lasting impact. I've got a bit of an acid test when I get an email into my inbox with oh my God, it's all going wrong. And I do the filter of, is this a firework or a fire? Fireworks will happen regardless. They'll be loud, they'll be splashy, but they will fizzle out whatever you do, whether you intervene or not. Let them happen. Okay, this also applies to academics who are just keyboard warriors, right? If it's a fire, it'll genuinely burn the house down. You need to get involved. So if you're trying to think about where do I need to get involved, this is the approach I use. Is it a firework or a fire? And then really go, use your networks, use mentorship, use inspiration, and be human in all of this. I try to summarize it as have a purpose, know what your purpose is. Use your people and really tap into those people and think about the people from the different perspectives. You can't lead anybody if you don't understand their perspective. So that takes me to my take-home messages. Your voice matters as an RTP. Make sure it's heard. Get into those places where you can be heard. Join the advisory groups. Speak up. And don't let conventional frameworks limit your ambition. I never thought I'd be a professor. I wanted to be a professor, but I never thought I would be, and I was told I never would be. I am, and I'm thrilled to be. Be bold, authentic, and let's deliver that impact together. We're riding a wave at the moment. Let's make the most of it.